so what we're going to do here is load a sample into the NNXT advanced sampler in Reason. So I've opened Reason. The first thing we do is create the sampler. So here we are, NNXT. Let's expand it so we can see its editing window. Here is our sampler. First thing we want to do is to load a sample. To do that, either right click in this region, get this menu and browse samples, or you can do the same thing from the edit menu. So let's browse a sample, and when the window comes up, navigate to the sample that you want. I'm going to choose this one, a sort of organ-like sound, and I'm going to load that into the sampler. Now this sound I looked at in another wave editor and made sure that when it was looped from beginning to end, it looped reasonably well. That's because the NNXT does not give you a loop editor. However, you can set the loop start and end points. But you can see what's happened here is that this sample has been loaded automatically into a zone, okay, from C1 to C6. You can adjust this zone, of course. If you've got a longer keyboard, then you just stretch it out so as it goes a bit longer, or if you just want it in one octave, then you can do that. That's how you set the zone. You can move the whole zone around. Okay, I'm going to leave it for the time being from C1 to C6. The root key at the moment is set at C2. I would like that to be C3. So I'm going to change my root key here to C3. That means when I play C3 on my keyboard, which I'm doing now, I hear the sample at the pitch which it was recorded. Okay, now what about looping it? Well, let's go along here. These are all the sample wave source editing controls along here. Play mode. Let's change that to a forward loop. Now the sample will loop. Now if your sample has a slight click, then you can adjust the loop start and end points using these buttons here. If I just push that up a little bit, and this one a little bit. Okay. Okay, I can still hear a slight click, so I might want to adjust that with a fine control, in which case I hold the shift key down. Now I can move the loop endpoints by frames, that is by single samples, like this. And if I just listen to the sound looping and make this adjustment, I can find a spot where it doesn't click. Okay, well that's reasonably enough for this exercise. So now we have our sample looped. It plays across the keyboard because it's been laid out on a zone. Next thing, we need to start shaping the sound. So for that, we move down to the amplitude envelope. Well, this is over here. And in this case, it plays all the time because the sustain level is set to maximum. Let me pull the sustain level down a little bit. Let's put a little shape to the sound with using the decay. Let's soften the attack of the sound by putting a little bit of an attack time. And let's make the sound ring a little bit after it's released by putting up the release time. Okay, so this is just shaping the sound itself. I got an email. Okay, attack is the time it takes for the sound to go from 0 to its maximum volume. Hold is the time that it sits at the maximum volume. Decay is the time it takes to decay from its maximum volume to the level set by the sustain level. The sustain level is that level, it is not a time. And the release is a time, it's the time it takes for the sound to decay to nothing after the key has been released. So now we have a shape to our sound. Okay, what about the tone? Tone is usually set with a filter. And in this case, we have a button here which is called frequency. Well, that's actually the cutoff frequency. So let's move that down and see what it sounds like. Okay, much more mellow. Let me hold the key and move this filter. You hear it move. Okay, if I adjust resonance, that will exaggerate frequencies at the cutoff frequency. That's the sound that we associate very much with synthesizers. Okay, so we have a sound which is a little bit different. We've modified the original sound of the wave, but at the moment it's always exactly the same sound no matter how hard I play the keyboard. So what about putting some dynamics to this sound by routing the velocity information to these controls? So here is our velocity information here. Let's route it to level. Now as I play harder, the sound will be louder. If I play soft, it'll be very quiet. You can probably hardly hear that. But let's also use velocity to open the filter a little bit. So now I play soft, I play loud, and we hear a nice big difference. So now our sound has some dynamics. What else can we do to this sound? Well, apart from the synthesis edit controls, we can also look at the source itself. This is a simple sound, I'm just using one wave, but we could maybe duplicate that wave. So if I right click anywhere on its zone, I can duplicate the zone. Now I have two identical zones, two identical sounds sitting on top of each other. If I click this button here, it says I can solo each zone. We hear that they're the same. Okay, what about this second one? Just so you can hear its difference, let me tune it up by 7 semitones. So it's now tuned a fifth above this zone here. Can you hear that? Okay, now we play them both together. You hear them both. A much thicker sound. It's rather like pulling out drawbars on an organ.